Welcome back to the second video as we're talking through this sample essay. We're currently at the beginning of the first body paragraph, which is about the summary. So this one, we've talked about the topic sentence. It's got the essay, "This is Water," David Foster Wallace, and you could shorten that, and you probably should shorten that to just the last name because the author's full name has been set up already. So in this case, it would go to Wallace. In your case, it would go to just Adichie. So you could have in the TED Talk, "The Danger of a Single Story" by Adichie. She. The elaborates on might, I would love to see a more active sentence, but this isn't bad. Elaborates on the concepts of how personal conceitedness naturally occurs. It's long, but it's okay. I will go fairly quickly through this paragraph because you can't really talk much about how it's summarized without knowing the speech itself, and I'm not going to make you go off and watch the speech, although it is a great speech. What I will emphasize in this is that I do want to make sure that you're paraphrasing everything, that you're putting it into your own words. Make sure as you do that, you're not just setting up a setup where you use the same order of words, the same formula for words, and just replace one at a time, but you have the same structure of the sentence. Make sure that you are both changing up the words and the sentence structure as well. If you get stuck, that might be an excellent thing to meet with me about. Remember, during my office hours, you don't have to plan those in advance. Just start a conference with me in Teams, or you can send me an email saying you'd like to have a conference now and we can start it right then. The only delay would be as if I'm already talking to somebody, but I'm happy to do that. You could also work with one of the face-to-face tutors through Teams with the tutoring center, and you've got the hours for those as well. So that would be something great to talk through with someone to make sure that you're on the right track. The other thing is, remember, it can be so easy to accidentally steal someone's words. So make sure that you go back after you write your summary paragraph, re-watch the speech, and keep your eye on the paragraph. Make sure that you didn't pick up any of those phrases and accidentally plagiarizing. So the other thing that I want to point out here is make sure that you're giving credit throughout the paragraph to your author. Adichie believes, Adichie states, and by repeating that, it's clear that these ideas are coming from the source material rather than coming from you. And this whole paragraph, Wallace is named here, and then in the one sentence. I would love to see it more often than that. Not every single sentence, but maybe in this case, at least once or twice more. If you have a longer paragraph, maybe at least 5 or 6 times in a paragraph of 12 sentences. So make sure that the reader is never in any doubt as to where these ideas came from. Make sure that you're always giving the author credit. According to Adichie, Adichie then goes on to say, Adichie suggests, Adichie mentions. There are so many of those phrases. They could go at the beginning of the sentence, but they don't have to. In fact, I would avoid having them always at the beginning of the sentence. So one of the ways that I would improve this summary paragraph is to mention the author more often, and especially at the beginning and end of the paragraph. I'm a big believer too far. I'm a big believer in conclusion sentences, so I want to always see you tying your ideas together at the end of a paragraph before you move on to the next one. And so in a summary paragraph, it would be a good idea to mention that author one last time. So we're then going to move on to the response paragraphs. So these should be a little bit easier to relate to. And just as with your instructions, the first response paragraph is the personal response. Respond to danger of a single story using an example from your life in particular. Make sure it's a specific example and not something overly general. Incorporate at least one relevant direct quote. Does this student have a direct quote? Yes. And while I am looking at this quote, 2 notes about it. One, the ellipsis at the end. This is a sentence that could easily just end there. It doesn't trail off unfinished. So if you have a sentence like that, then you can just leave off an ellipsis at the beginning or end of a sentence. You only need them for in the middle of a sentence, or if you're using the end of a sentence where the author does trail off, then do that. But for this, you can absolutely take those out. The other thing I want to mention is this page number that's mentioned. So the students had a transcript of this, and so there actually was a page number that they could use rather than just the speech. However, you get different instructions with this. So I have here page 128 from the Little Seagull Handbook. I've got my online copy here. And for MLA format, internal documentation, and internal documentation just means inside the body of the essay as opposed to the works cited page, which we'll talk about later. But if you have an audio or video recording, give the hours, minutes, and seconds separated by colons as shown on the player. So for each of your direct quotes from Medici's video, you're going to need to show where it starts and where it stops. If for some reason the player you have is counting backwards, then I'm sorry, you're going to have to do a little bit of math to figure out, because the first number needs to be smaller than the second number. So if you have difficulties or questions, talk to me about this. Again, talk to me during office hours, send me an email. We can get through it pretty quickly. I just want to make sure that you know to use the timestamp for it. Okay, minimize that now. So in your case, this would be the time that it starts and then a dash and the time it stops. And you would do that for each of the quotes. So with that out of the way, let's look at how this works for a personal response paragraph. One example of the way Wallace's essay can be relevant to my life is when I'm caught in a difficult driving situation. Okay, so we've set up the subject. The difficult driving situation is relevant to Wallace's essay. Here's my problem. It can be relevant to my life, doesn't show the exact connection. It just establishes that there is a connection. So I would love to see this topic sentence be revised one more time so that the student shows exactly what the connection is. So it may be, I feel exactly like Wallace when I'm in a difficult driving situation, and then maybe then in that I get furious. Something like that, where it becomes much more specific rather than general about that connection. And the student goes on to make that connection, but I would like to see it in the topic sentence as well. Oftentimes, and you'll see this blue underlining, it just means oftentimes should be a single word. Oftentimes I get angry with other drivers on the road if something goes wrong with or traffic's slow. And this is a great time to point out, make sure that you're proofreading and revising. If something goes wrong in traffic slow, it should be or traffic is slow. And let me point back to this assignment sheet and remind you, one of the things I'm looking for in these designated learning outcomes are what I'm looking for when I'm grading. And one of the things is moves through several steps, including multiple drafts before becoming a finished product. If you are not proofreading, if it looks like you just wrote this and posted it to the assignments Dropbox, you're not going to be doing well on that. So make sure that you're taking into consideration these designated learning outcomes for not just this essay, but for future ones as well. So if something goes wrong or traffic is slow, I typically blame anyone other than myself. This accusation causes me to either want to yell or honk repetitively at whomever I believe is causing the incident. Love saying whomever because it's the object of a preposition, so that is absolutely the right word to use. Releasing my anger upon others should not be the solution if I follow Wallace's philosophies. This is a great sentence for connecting with the speech and showing exactly how the two relate to one another. So absolutely on the right track. Wallace elaborates on the ideas of focusing on the perspectives. Again, make sure that you are proofreading. And also, if you try proofreading something right after you read it, you will miss things like this because you will see what your brain expects you to see. So Wallace elaborates on the ideas of focusing on the perspectives of everyone other than on myself. This just jumped from Wallace to myself, so it's a little awkward. He justifies that if I don't make the conscious decision about how to think and what to pay attention to, I'm going to be pissed and miserable. I will say, if you're writing in your own writing, please don't include a word like this because of the formal aspect of the essay. However, in direct quotes, that's fine. I think that this is an okay introduction to the quote. He justifies that if I don't make the conscious decision. And I think that works really well here because the focus is on the second part. And otherwise, I'm not usually a fan of introducing quotes with the word that. Otherwise, you can replace it with a comma. So keep that in mind. So after the quote, you want to show how the quote directly relates to your point. If I don't make a conscious decision about how to think and what to pay attention to, I'm going to be pissed and miserable. Now we're going to connect it. I basically have to decipher whether I want to only care about myself and be miserable, or if I want to be control of my actions and be happier. So clearly the word in should be in here as well. We're having several proofreading issues in the same paragraph. So it's connecting the quote to the student's life and to the student's point. The outcome of my feelings is a representation of how much mind control I have. When I become frustrated while driving, I need to recognize that other people have lives and I should be respectful to them. So it does a good job of getting it back to the specific example, though I would like to see more about that personal example with other drivers. There are several sentences here, but then it goes away for a long time and it only comes back in the very last sentence. I would love to see you spend more time with that specific example that becomes the main point of the paragraph and how, in your case, Adichie relates to that point. Okay, so before I get into the next paragraph, I'm going to start a new video and then we will end it with that third video.